In 1989, he joined the staff of the Information Office here in Washington. He subsequently became a senior research analyst responsible for analyzing U.S. domestic political events and monitoring news reports. During the 1990-1991 Operation Desert Shield Desert Storm, he was assigned to the team establishing the Joint Information Bureau that became the Media Center in Dhahran during the war. In 1997, he joined the Saudi Foreign Service and served in the office of the Assistant Minister for Political Affairs in Riyadh before his posting here as the Information Officer at the Embassy. We look forward to his remarks. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Al-Jubeir.
Thank you for these kind remarks. Thank you all for coming here today. It's always a pleasure talking to such distinguished groups as the World Affairs Council. Thank you, Heidi. It's again a pleasure hosting you here, and it's these events that sort of add some flavor to the embassy series. I want to say something quickly with Dr. John Anthony here. He scares me. Because he is a professor. I've learned more about him, about Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, than I think of anybody else. He knows it better than anyone I've known, and makes it more difficult for me to speak because now he's sitting first row and I'm looking like, oh my God, am I off? Now you're scaring me, and I totally don't get nervous in these speeches, but having him sitting here first row looking at me with his pen is like, it's scary. So I do have a prepared statement, but I might just sort of skip it just to be safe side. No, it's. But as I was saying, it's to go over the U.S.-Saudi relations. It's a long history of U.S.-Saudi relations that goes back before the discovery of oil in Saudi Arabia. It's the origin of the date person can go back to the time of the Arab revolt against the Ottomans, can go back to the British control of the colonization of the region. Historically, we usually point at U.S.-Saudi relations, the beginning of them, at the meeting between President Roosevelt and King Abdulaziz. But that was just decades after the original meeting, and that was when U.S. businessmen came to Saudi Arabia. A gentleman by the name of Crane was so impressed and interested in the Middle East that he invested his family's money, or his share of the money, which happens to be in plumbing, into developing and bringing water to the region. And King Abdulaziz asked him if he has any engineer to look, geologist to look for water in Saudi Arabia. So he decided to send one of his engineers, a gentleman from Vermont, who traveled the country looking for water. Everywhere he went, he didn't find anything, and he went to King Abdulaziz and said, you know, I've got bad news. There's really not much water that we could find anywhere in Saudi Arabia. However, there might be some oil. Now, we've sort of have the same problem we're facing right now. 75 years later, we look for water and we face the same problem that he had. We end up with oil. It might sound interesting, but for a country that depends heavily on water, or the need for water, which we see the next crisis in the region will be the lack of water, it's more important to us to have that. Having said that, the relationship between U.S. and Saudi Arabia was developed by the business community, not by politicians going back and forth, not a military interest of alliances, but it was business communities who sort of built a bridge back in the 30s, who came. The geologist left his home in Vermont to go to Saudi Arabia. You had business executives who left their homes in in Texas and Oklahoma and California to go to Saudi Arabia and work in the oil fields. And with that, a lot of engineers came in that followed. So that relationship was built on people-to-people contact. The political aspect was developed later. In the meeting at between Roosevelt and President Roosevelt and King Abdulaziz, when they set it up, the question that King Abdulaziz asked before the meeting with Roosevelt was, do the Americans have colonies, and does he believe in God? And the answer was, they don't have any colonies, and yes, he does believe in God. And that sort of cemented it. They met, they understood each other. Saudi Arabia looked for a country that it would deal with. We looked around us in our neighborhood, and we saw in the south where you had the British, in the east you had the British, in the west you had the British, in the north you had the French and the British. And we looked at a country that could be helpful as an ally, that has no political ambitions in the region, and the United States was the person to look forward to. Furthermore, King Faisal, back then the Prince Faisal, was so impressed by President Wilson's 14 points about sort of independence for countries, decolonization, that he espoused to it and started supporting that call and looked at the U.S. as a natural ally and leader. And that's how the relationship built. We've sent our students to the United States. We had an estimated at about 50,000 students. The number that Prince Turki used to use was about 200,000 Saudis who've come or attended U.S. schools over the years, whether it is primary schools, college, military training, what have you. We have currently about 25,000 students enrolled in American colleges and universities as part of the 62,000 students that we have worldwide paid for by the Saudi government to study. Overwhelming majority of those chose the United States because their parents went to school here. They have fond memories of the United States. They look at the U.S. sort of for most of them as a second home. The relationship that we believed in that was damaged as a result of September 11 has been reestablished. There is a greater understanding between the two parties. It is much more transparent in what's going on. In the past, it was a mostly one-to-one relationship, but it's much more transparent. What 9/11 showed the world was put more light into that relationship so people know that there is more to the relationship just simply that has always been used oil for security. The relationship is deeper. We are partners in a lot of issues that before we never discussed, but we do. We are partners in the peace process. We believe it is in the interest for the region to have a solid peace process. Out of that peace process, you can move towards security issues, you can move towards development, you can move into helping your own countries, the region, develop.